Hello, hello and welcome everybody. Hope you are all doing fantastically well. Hope I'm coming through okay. Thank you very much for joining. It's been a little while since I've done one of these streams, and so I need to check and make sure that everything is configured okay. Anyways, hope everyone's having a great week, and oh, come on. I'm trying to get chat up on this other window, and it's fighting against me. All right. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I was having someone saying it sounds like two mics. I have echoes. Okay, I gotta pull OBS onto this monitor for a second, so I'm sorry about causing some disruption there. Yes, you're right, I do have. Okay. Let's get rid of. I needed to see what was going on here. Hopefully that has fixed the echo for y'all. Sorry about that. Some OBS updates got me, I think. Yeah, sorry about that. There's been some updates to OBS, and I haven't been streaming so often lately that I sort of missed out on fixing that. Let's make sure that you're getting a little bit of audio from the VTT itself. I'm going to turn on, I'm not going to use too much music, but I'm just going to put on like a little bit of background music. You guys let me know if it is coming through okay. It should be pretty low key. If it's too loud, I can certainly turn the little like ambience music down a bit further, but I set it pretty low, so it hopefully will be all right for y'all. Let me know though. Okay. Really quiet but audible is probably just about what I want at this point, so that I don't, give you guys too much on the music department. All right. So yeah, thank you all very much for joining. It's been a little while since we've done one of these streams, and so I'm really excited to get the chance to hang out and chat with y'all about all the exciting stuff that we've been doing lately in Foundry Land. There's been, oh my gosh, so much going on. We've been very, very busy. But yeah, today we released Foundry V11. Pardon the banner saying V10, but we released V11 Dev 2 release, and yeah, it's a really important step on the path for us to getting to V11 stable, which is a milestone that I am very excited for us to hit in the near-ish future. So really excited to talk with y'all about what this means in terms of where we are in the dev process, what's coming up next, what we still want to do before we get to a point that we're talking about stable, and what are some of the like really great stuff that gets added in this release 11.295, and then kind of like what we're looking ahead towards for the future. So I also really look forward to answering y'all's questions during the stream, so I'll try and answer questions all throughout. And if you have a question, follow Chaos OS 59's example if you can. Just preface it with like question, all caps, so that I can easily pick that out of the crowd and get you an answer. I don't expect to answer your question, Chaos, I don't expect this to break or affect the CLI. That's kind of a separate repo at this point. There's nothing that we changed here that would alter that functionality. And just a quick response for Saint SL or STSL. So the program is not stable. So V11 is a not yet released version of Foundry VTT. Foundry VTT version 10 is the current stable release. We are working hard on version 11, and version 11 is not yet stable, no. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to go through the update notes. I'm going to talk about some of the new stuff. I'm going to show examples of what some things can do, answer your questions, and we'll just have a good time. So without further ado, I'll jump into the update highlights, and we'll talk about these first, maybe. And then after talking about the update highlights, we can get into some of the more like nitty-gritty stuff that got done in this update. So first highlight of V11 Dev 2, Compendium pack improvements. So we did a lot of work in prior steps of V11 to add new functionality to individual Compendium packs, and I have some examples to show here, but this is a new sidebar UI that you're seeing for the first time, where in the Compendium sidebar we have folders, we have a new sort of look for individual Compendium packs. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. There's some new filtering options, there's some new sorting options. So basically just like an overhaul and improvement of the functionality of the Compendium sidebar, and Cody did some great work on that in this update, and certainly the rest of the team pitched in as well, but Cody led the charge on this feature, and it's really come together really nicely. I'm excited to show how that can work and what that looks like. I think I'm probably going to switch to a different world real quick where I have maybe a different world where I can show some different facets of Compendium sidebar. So here in this world is one where I was like doing a little bit of organization earlier today. So I have like some different folders, and of course for many of you you'll have many more Compendium packs than this, but one thing that you'll notice is that the Compendium sidebar is no longer like auto sorted by the document type that's in the Compendium. You still have the ability to do that sort of organization yourself, but now that we support folders for Compendium packs, it's really sort of more left to the user about like how do you want to organize your stuff, not so much like how do we want to organize it for you. So yeah, I think that's going to be a really nice change. So I put some little organization in my world here. I've got some like map packs and some other like modules that add Compendium stuff, and then I have a bunch of stuff related to a game system. And then of course with the game system as well, like we now have there's like a little banner image for the pack. We're still refining the UI here a little bit. Like the focus of the Dev 2 release was really more like the underlying data structures and API, but you can define your own banner images for Compendium packs, and then there's some sort of like fallback defaults that you get for the document type if you haven't defined your own. And so this is not a new thing in this release, but as you can see, there's also like folders inside the Compendium pack as well. So there's sort of all kinds of different layers of organization that didn't exist before in V10. So organization inside the Compendium packs, and then organization of the Compendium packs themselves, all of which make it hopefully a lot easier to stay organized and to find the stuff that you're looking for. Some things that I can highlight here. So obviously you can create new folders or create new Compendium packs. You can filter. Now there's a little filter. We need to improve the contrast here a bit, but the concept still is valid. Like say I want to look at just the Compendium packs that add macros. If I expand all of the folders here, you'll see like I can toggle in, here's all the packs. I can filter in and just say just the ones that have macros, or can get rid of that, just the ones that add items. You can filter for multiple like items or scenes. So there's like a little filter thing here. You can search, of course, like talent. I can get like, here's the talents. I can sort of search that way. I can toggle between sort of a alphabetical or manual sorting. So here, if I sort these folders well, maybe not. I think maybe this is only doing alphabetical right now. I'll have to look into that. But some different toggling for the sort in terms of like the root level. Is it sorted alphabetically or is it sorted manually? That's some new stuff. And so, yeah, honestly, like, given that this is sort of the way that regular document sidebars already work, I expect that there might be a little bit of wondering like why this was such a big feature. And I'd like to talk for a moment about like why was this such a big feature to do. we had a lot of abstraction and implementation around the organization of documents using folders, but compendium packs are not documents. Of course, the contents of compendium packs are documents. So when there's an item in a compendium pack, the item is a document and the compendium pack is a collection that contains it. But the compendium sidebar isn't like an organization, like a tree structure of folders and documents. It's a tree structure of folders and compendium packs. And that's a very different thing. And so we had to sort of break a lot of our own rules in terms of how the software could handle those sorts of data structures and collections to break away from the sort of hard assumption that we are only dealing with organizing documents in this way. And so that was actually quite a large endeavor to undertake that. And so the consequence of that is that now we have folders that can be of the compendium type, and that's something that can exist, and we can know how to organize compendium packs using this same structure. And at the end of the day, it ends up looking and feeling and behaving basically the same as all of the other document-based tabs of the sidebar, but under the hood, it is quite a more, I guess it's not more involved necessarily, but it required a really different implementation to get us there. So that was a really important component of this particular release. Let me pause for a second and see if there's any questions from chat about this one. VT Tom asks, will there be a function where I can transfer my compendium folder order to another world? Not at this time, VT Tom, but that could be something to keep in mind. Currently, the mapping of like what compendium pack is in what folder is stored as a world level setting, and so at the moment those would be world specific. And I think there's use cases for that where like in world A you might want to organize your packs one way, but in world B you want to organize it another way. So I think it's good that those can be separate, different for different worlds, but your question makes sense of like, is there a way that I could quickly import that so that I don't have to redo it every time? I think that's a good thing for us to consider. Let's see. Question from Mixif. Will compendium banners be optional, bulky banner image, undesired for my use case? Maybe. This is kind of a late addition, this banner concept. I think we're going to consider refinement to the UI UX specifically in the user testing phase. That's kind of conceptually the time that we'll put the most focus on that, and that is the phase that we are now entering. So I think now that this is in as like a first pass, I think we'll certainly be continuing to iterate on the UI to see if we like this, or if we want something more terse, or if we want this banner up here, or if we want it to be optional, or maybe it only appears if your pack explicitly declares a banner, but it doesn't show if there's just like the default one. I think all of those are good things to consider, and so that's kind of where we are going to be headed now that we are past the hurdle of this dev phase release. All right, I think that looks like it's the question. Question from Nocturnal: how will this interact with the legacy compendium folder module? Will it convert or will it be flat? So this is not going to play super nicely with the legacy compendium folder module, unfortunately. That module had to do what it did in a sort of roundabout way through no fault of the module's author. Just because there wasn't a better way to do it, that module would have had to use a collection of game settings and other kind of rendering tricks to put compendium into folders. We have a much more data model driven method of doing folder organization now. I think what we'd like to do is work with the author of the compendium folder module and provide a migration path where certainly like the data contained in the compendium folder module could be migrated to become sort of official Compendium folder data. It just will require a little bit of translation code to take whatever configuration a user previously had in that module and kind of apply it in the new way. There's APIs around all of these things. So, you can create a folder in the Compendium sidebar via the API. You can assign a Compendium pack to a folder via the API. So all of the tools are in place to take whatever organizational schema was in place using a Compendium folders module and to apply that using core functionality. However, I think our path to accomplishing that would be to advise and support the author of the Compendium folder module in providing that feature if desired. I think we, from a core perspective, don't really shoulder the responsibility of taking what was previously module only data and migrating it to core data. But I think we would rather work with the module author to make that a reality, which I think is reasonable, and that's definitely something that can be done. All right, cool. Let's move on a little bit. We can talk about the next feature. Actually, I'll probably tackle these two at the same time. So there's some pretty neat new features related to the setup menu of the software. So as you know, or as you may know or may not know, we've been investing a lot of effort into redesign of the setup menu as part of a overarching longer term design process for the software itself. So here I'll, I guess, maybe shift my windows a little bit to make the VTT one a little bit bigger and the notes a little smaller. What you see on the left is the new design that is still work in progress, but coming together, design of the setup screen of the VTT software. And so this is obviously a very new look compared to what you have in the software today. But let me walk you all through some of the new stuff here that we've been doing to continue improving the functionality of the setup screen. The first thing that I'll draw all of your attention to, we got lots of great feedback from our community about the organization of systems and modules and things. And obviously, different ways to visually represent the data work better for different people. And so we added here at the top of each tab a little toggle between three view modes for each of the tabs. So here on the Game Worlds tab, currently it's in what's called gallery view, where in gallery view you have these kind of rectangular thumbnail type things with a little background image for each world. And that's one way to sort of visualize the way that your worlds look. I can put it into tiles view, which is much more compact. So you get a really high amount of information density in tiles view. But each individual world card is much smaller. And then we can also put it into details view, where you get a lot more information about each world. There's you can actually sort of read through the full text description of each world that you have. And it's more just sort of one world at a time, with the sort of world featured thumbnail image here on the left, and then any world description on the right. And so just different ways to represent that. I think what's pretty cool about this is that the view preference is saved on a per package type basis. So for example, I can have here my modules. Say I want my modules tab to be in tiles view because I have lots of modules and I want it to be pretty compact. But I like the game systems tab in this gallery view, but I like having my worlds in details view. So you can kind of keep each tab on a different view mode. So that's gives you some flexibility in terms of just how do you want your setup screen to look in terms of what your preferences are for that. let's talk a little bit about where these images are coming from. So let me see if I can find the issue here. Thumbnail. Yeah, so issue 8913. Basically, I guess I should just say, I should change the title here to say package, because it applies to modules as well with this new technique. In the package manifest data, there's support for a media array. And this is something that we added support for to just kind of canonize and support what had previously been done in the community with regards to what was called Manifest Plus, which is kind of like a community convention around additional manifest fields. So we added core support for media in our core manifest as well. That happened in V10. But we hadn't really used it in core yet, so now we are. There is the possibility to define a setup type asset in the media object. And if you define a setup media, then that provides a image, optionally with a smaller thumbnail for better performance, that gives the setup sort of banner image for that package. So, for example, the D&D 5e game system here is, I can pull up the manifest for that and show you what that looks like. System. Yeah, so like in the media object here, it defines this sort of setup image. I guess there's not too much more to show than that, but yeah, it's just a way to define like which image do you want to have used for the package. Worlds will use their own setup image if one is available. If one is not available, it will use the setup image of the game system that the world is built around. So that's a new feature in terms of giving each package the ability to declare those image files. I'll take a question or two before I move on. Any chance of filters/sorts for setup screen sections and such? Yeah, I think probably we might add some sort of filter thing similar to what we did with the Compendium packs. I guess, there are some sort of common filters that would be useful, like, for example, like, incompatible or like not up to date, or premium versus not premium. Like, I think there are some like various little like filtering options that could be useful to have for all installed packages. And so it would be nice to add like a filter menu. I don't think that's an issue that we currently have written up, but it would be compatible with the theme of what we're focused on in V11. And so it is definitely something that we might be able to explore during the testing phases between now and V11 stable. So I like that suggestion, and hopefully if there's someone on the team that's listening in, maybe you can help me remember to write that up as an issue for us to consider. It may already be an issue. Question from Sunjammer: are the news and featured content sections optional and hideable? I regret to answer your question by saying that no, they aren't. They are just part of our UI design. I think we feel like it's important to have a way to connect with our user base and to share things that are relevant and new in the Foundry ecosystem. It really helps us to promote awareness of things that are happening, and it really helps our publishing partners and content creators that we work with to have a mechanism to share their amazing work with people who might be interested in it. I know it's a controversial thing. I know not everyone's going to agree with that, but that is the path that we're taking. And so, yeah, that's where things are with that. Question from Mute Foxy: any chance that there could be a separator between worlds by game system? Yeah, I think that's a nice suggestion. That could also be sort of part of some filtering possibility. I think that's something that folks are interested in, and it's a nice idea. About favorite button on world, that is also another idea that we're debating for V11. Part of the reason we didn't prioritize favorite for world yet is because now worlds are auto-sorted based on the last time that they were used. So your most recently accessed worlds are always at the top of the list, and having your most recently accessed worlds always at the top of the list kind of dilutes the necessity a little bit of a favorite star or a favorite pin, because the stuff that you're using most frequently is sort of organically floats to the top, but it is something that we might still consider adding. Zeal asks about what happens if you're offline. So when we retrieve the latest set of news and featured content, that news and featured content is cached locally until it is updated. So if you were to be offline, you would see whatever news and featured content you saw last time you were online, and then next time you're online again, you'd get a fresh set of news and content. Let's see. Question from Rmax Beats. How about the background image of the UI? Can that be changed? Yes and, well, no, not yet, although that is something that we are experimenting with. So one of the things that we did in V11, and this is a good segue for me to show it, I want to preface this by saying it's going to seem a little bit like a nothing feature right now, but the value of us doing this is creating a framework that we can then do much more with in the future. So in your application options for V11, there's a new setting called Setup Theme, where you can choose between multiple UI setup themes. Now, currently there's two options there. One that's called Foundry Virtual Tabletop, which is kind of like our default UI, which is what you're seeing right now. And there's another one that is called Classic Fantasy. Now, this theme is not done yet. It really, for the time being, basically only changes some colors a little bit. I'll show you what it looks like if I save that. So here in Classic Fantasy, like some of the tones are a little bit more muted, like more earth tones, a little bit less vibrant color. But I also don't want anyone to think that like this is what we're trying to go for with this theme. This is not a finished theme that we have here. This is more of like a proof of concept of what would be involved to have support for different themes. So it's more about like building the system that we can use in the future than this is like a feature that we've added right now. But anyways, each setup theme could have a very different way of styling the setup area. Now, I don't want people's imaginations to run away with them. This isn't something that we intend to expose to module developers at this time. These will be internally provided setup themes that we offer. Now, the original question was about like changing the setup screen background image. That is something that we might open up to being a setting so that like whichever setup theme you choose, you can also change the background art. I think that's something that's come up in previous feedback, and I think generally speaking, that's a pretty good idea for us to support. Let's see. Question from Ikabodo. Any chance of being able to add animated images or files to the world edit scene? I guess maybe you mean as the world background. I don't think we'll support video for there right now. I don't think there's any plans for that, but if you were to make your image an animated WebP or an animated PNG, it probably will work. Question from Revelo Waldo. Disappointed to hear the decision regarding featured content, but understand your position. Have you better defined how you intend to select what is presented to users in those boxes beyond the static placeholder? we have internally had discussions about this, and we have some internal plans on this. I don't think it's something that I want to make any sort of public commitment around, but our intention is to make an honest effort to present users with content that will be hopefully interesting and relevant to them. So part of the value of having, for example, shared usage data is that we would be able to use that usage data, which we can use as a way to try and not recommend something that is very unlikely to be interesting to you based on the content that you currently have installed. So suppose we see somebody anonymously, of course the usage data is anonymous, but we still can see as part of that request, we can see that, oh, this user has a bunch of Pathfinder content installed. That might encourage us to say, well, let's recommend Abomination Vaults to them, but we wouldn't want to recommend Abomination Vaults if they already have Abomination Vaults. So a lot of the benefit of that usage data would be to help us refine what would be returned to the user as featured content. And ideally we would, we would seek to do that in a way that would present you with something that will be of interest. That's to your benefit, it's to our benefit, it's to the creators who partner with us. Nobody wants to see something that just they think totally sucks. So our goal will be to minimize that as much as possible by offering some smart predictions. Now, for folks who don't share usage data, and we don't know anything about what you have installed or what you like, we do still know, because we're validating your license key, we do still know what content you've purchased through the premium content system, so we can at least avoid recommending something that you already own. But beyond that, we'll have more limited ability to make a recommendation. So for folks that aren't sharing usage data, it's more likely to be based on what's new, what's a new high quality module that's released that you don't already own. But for people that do share usage data, there may be more of a sort of nuanced prediction framework for surfacing a recommendation. Let's see. All right. Sorry, I'm just getting caught up on questions. Florian, did we consider European GDPR when implementing the usage data collection? Yeah, we have. Yeah, and legislation is complicated, so there may be someone out there who says, "But wait, this," and if so, please contact us. But I believe that our implementation of the feature is compliant. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, let me move on a little bit. High level question though that I will tackle real quick from Medeiros 3010. When will version 11 come out? Do you have any predictions? I don't have a promise for you, and so treat this as a prediction only. I think that we're probably going to take a couple rounds of testing releases, and so that would put us around mid-May. Well, Fingers, it's better for me to say I believe we are than I believe we aren't. The truth is I do believe we are. That belief is based on some research and an honest attempt to be. But if you want to construe that in a negative light, that is, of course, your prerogative. All right, let's talk about another cool feature in V11 that is related to the setup menu. So this relates to something that I think one of you asked about earlier in the stream, which was about, sharing Compendium. Actually, no, that question earlier in the stream was about sharing the folder organization for Compendium packs across worlds. This is a little bit different, but one thing that comes up very frequently is that folks want the ability to share Compendium packs across worlds. For people who aren't necessarily comfortable with module development. So historically, our answer has been, well, you need to create a little module that has compendium packs in it, and you need to set that up so that you can share it across multiple worlds. And that has been a valid approach, and that is the recommended way to share content across multiple worlds, but it's been a little bit not user-friendly to get there. So now we have a much better solution for that. On the add-on modules tab of the setup menu, there's a new button next to update all that is create module. So now there is a UI-driven workflow to creating a module, where in this application you can choose an ID, like my shared packs, my shared compendium packs. I can give it a package version. I can fill out some things like this is my own personal use module for sharing stuff across worlds. I can fill out some compatibility info as needed. On the authors tab, if I want to give people credit for having contributed to this, I can say, yeah, this is made by Andrew, Atropos, admin at foundryvtt.com. Oh no, I'm leaking an email address. Foundryvtt.com website. On compendium packs, which is certainly like the relevant tab for the purposes of sharing that type of content, you can add compendium packs. Like here, I'll say like my actors. I can say I'm going to have actors for D&D 5th edition. I'm going to have, my macros. I'm going to have a compendium pack of macros. Doesn't have to have a required system. I can fill out which compendium packs this module should have. Similarly, on the relationships tab, if I want to say like this, I can fill out dependencies, like maybe this package depends on the 5th edition system, and it depends on Dice So Nice as a required dependency, and it optionally adds support for sequencer. Like if you have sequencer, it's a recommended compatibility. And so I can fill out all of this info, and then, moment of truth, I can go and create my package, and there I have my shared packs as a new module that's installed in my VTT. That is my own module that I can manage, and I can use it, and it will have those compendium packs that I specified at the point of creation. And so, for example, if I go back into my D&D test world here, I can manage modules, and we can turn on my shared compendium packs. And here will prompt me like, oh, you need Dice So Nice, and you might need sequencer, because I defined those dependencies when I was creating the module. So let's turn Dice So Nice on, but let's skip sequencer right now because it's optional, and then we'll reload. So this sort of like visually managed module creation process will make it much easier for non-dev users to create those sorts of data structures that allow them to have that content across multiple worlds. And so now that I've enabled that module, I have my shared actors, and I have my macros compendium packs, and I can start adding stuff to them. Oops, they're locked. I have to unlock it. But yeah, I think you get the idea that this is a much easier way for people to start sharing that content without needing to use like an external tool to build the module or whatnot. Let me check in on any questions that folks have. Question from Tom, can I edit the created compendium pack after creation if I make updates? That is a feature I hope to add support for, however, not at this point in Dev 2. What I would like to do is for a module that was created using this tool, I'd like to add the ability to go back and say like, I want to now, edit this and add additional compendium packs to it later on. I think conceptually that should be feasible to do with the framework that we've created here. However, I haven't had a chance to do that yet. And so I don't want to promise, but that is an issue that I have slated for the next release, testing 1, that if it works out the way that I hope, then the answer will be yes, you will be able to edit your module that you created previously and say like make changes to it or add additional compendium packs to it or whatnot. All right, let's see. Just some good chat. Obviously, anything GDPR related generates a lot of discussion. Question, can opened compendiums get a button to lock/unlock? Could be a good idea, yeah. It might be nice when you have the compendium open like this to have a button in it that could allow you to do that locking or unlocking. I think that's a nice UX feedback. Cody, if you're listening, you might want to intake that one. I think that's a nice option, a nice idea to be able to unlock the compendium like while from this view, like while it's open. I think that's a nice suggestion. Question from Arcane 1. Has any exploration been done into layers on maps? Let me answer that briefly because it's kind of unrelated to the agenda of V11 Dev 2. We have not prioritized scene levels, which is the conceptual feature that you're referring to here, Arcane. This is a big feature, scene levels, that we are very excited and determined to add to Foundry VTT at some point. That is not a feature, however, that was prioritized for V11, and so it's not something that we are working on currently. But there has been a lot of thought put into that feature and what it would be like and how we might approach it, and it's definitely something that we hope to do in a future release. So I guess good news, bad news for you on that, Arcane. No, it's not something that we've been looking at the moment, but it is definitely something that we are thinking about for the future. Question from Kiros. Is there going to be a possibility to potentially build out compendium packs like that to be shared with the wider Foundry community? I think probably not for V11. It may be an extension in the future that we can offer some way to like take the module that you've created and offer some support to like getting it published. Of course, you can do that yourself. You can take a module that you created in this way and add it to a publicly accessible URL, and you can fill out the manifest and download fields of the manifest, and then it can become shareable in the way that you want. But that requires some decisions to be made that kind of go beyond the scope of what our like in UI tool can do. And so, we may not take that on ourselves not as part of this update. Question from Floradical. With the new possible entries for package manifests, will we possibly see an official schema? You may not find my answer to be all that appetizing, but I would say there is an official schema. It is the schema that is defined in base package in our API. So, I would say that we do have an official schema of what the package manifest has, and it's defined here. You may be talking about something like a JSON schema, and I don't think that that's something that we intend to try and officially support. I think it's up to the community if some community dev tools, type things want to try and support that. But our officially maintained package schema is defined in publicly viewable code and in our API docs, and so that's what we want to focus on. question from Guitar Guy Nick. Will the module maker allow for premium module sales? I mean, not on its own, but it also doesn't prevent that. Like, someone who starts making a module using that module maker could then later configure it as a premium module that could be sold, but that's sort of outside of the scope of what that tool does. It sounds like you've had your question answered, but you certainly don't have to wait for V11 to start doing module development. This tool that I'm showing here, it's just designed to make the process of like setting the module up a little bit easier. But if you have some technical familiarity with web development concepts, like if you're familiar with like the concept of what is a JSON file, if you know what that means, then you're not going to have a problem creating a module yourself. If that sounds like, a foreign language to you, part of what this new feature in V11 does is it makes it more user-friendly to create those modules without needing to know some of the technical underpinnings. All let's see. Question from Vex. You troll. Will updating from V6 to V11 break my world? Probably. But it might not. Are items with item embedded documents on your radar? I realize they won't be in V11. Probably not nocturnal. I mean, mines may always be changed in the future, but I don't think we intend to add items embedded inside items at this time. Any use case for items embedded inside items can almost always be solved in a different way that is just as good, or so I claim. All right, let me pause for a second in terms of answering questions, and let me go back to some of the update highlights. So I talked about homemade modules. I talked about stylish setup. Let's talk about doors. Doors are really fun. And I can also showcase some weather stuff. Take a look at this scene here. I want to show some cool things about this scene. What you'll notice with this scene is that, let me zoom in, and you'll see that we've got this beautiful blizzard happening just outside our tower here. The weather is very, very bad outside. I mean, I could change it to be like a rainstorm instead. Maybe it doesn't show up too well on the background, so I could try doing like heavy fog maybe. I guess the white background here kind of makes it a little bit difficult to visually see. Floating autumn leaves, it doesn't really make sense for this map, but you can also see that the weather is happening outside but not inside. This is a common sort of situation where you have maps that have an outdoor component and an indoor component. Now, historically, you've been able to have this sort of weather effect masking using a roof tile, but that creates a pretty specific requirement for how that has to be handled. And for maps like this one, it doesn't really make sense to use a roof tile for like the whole building. And so now there is support for masking of weather effects, where what I've done here is defined a masking image that defines for the map where should weather be and where should weather not be. And there's a couple ways to do that. Now, as part of our API development phase release, this feature is added as sort of like an API only feature. There's not like a user-friendly configuration for this right now, but that's something that we may be able to add in the future. But for more advanced users, whether you're like a adventure creator or a scene, like a battle map artist, and you want to make your maps that have that like extra special level of detail, the way that this works, I'll give a quick demo of what's actually going on here, is that so like here's a scene where I did this for, what was it, a frozen remote prison. So basically my weather mask is an image that looks like this. It's just a one channel only red channel image. So it's a very efficient texture format. It's just red only. And the way that I have this set up is where there's red, there should be no weather, and where there's less red or no red, there should be weather. And you notice I've given it like a really nice sort of smooth gradient so that we get like a nice gradation of weather at the edges. It's not like a stark cutoff. The weather sort of like fades at the edge where the gradient of the weather mask is as well. So basically, like, this is just an extra image file that I've created for my scene. And then in terms of like how I've configured it, this is using just a little bit of JavaScript that I'll show you what I did. So in the world, I'm just using a world script, but this JavaScript could live anywhere. It could be in a module, it could be in a system, it could be a world level script like what I have here. Oops, come on. So here's my world script. It's not very long. I'm doing two things in this world script. Oh, this like spooky music is a little bit intense. Let's maybe advance on to another one. So in my world script, I'm doing a couple of things. So I'm using two different hooks. One is on canvas init and one is on canvas draw. In the canvas init hook, I'm actually using a new V11 feature, which is canvas scene textures, which is a pretty cool new thing that exists. So what you can do with canvas scene textures is you can register any texture paths that should be loaded as part of the initial canvas load. So here I'm taking the texture path of my terrain mask image that I've made, and I'm registering that as part of scene textures in the canvas init hook so that this texture will be automatically loaded. So as you know, like when you load a scene, for example, if I like control F5 here, you know there's like a progress bar up at the top about like, oh, I'm loading this scene. Those scene textures that I've loaded as part of, that I've registered as part of that object are, you know, loaded as part of that progress bar and as part of that loading. So after canvas init, I can trust that this texture has already been loaded asynchronously. So in the canvas draw hook, I can configure the terrain mask for this scene by saying, you know, we're going to use this mask texture. The terrain mask should be enabled. I can configure which RGB channels the mask should use. I can configure whether it's inverted, like show weather where there's red or no weather where there's red, depending on whether I want it to be reversed or not. And so this little configuration will automatically apply to any weather effects that are present in the scene. So when a weather effect gets activated in the scene, that terrain mask will automatically be applied to the whole scene. So yeah, really exciting feature that can make battle maps just even more immersive and have even more detail. Like this was a feature we did specifically in House Divided. I recall, like with the manor, everyone was very impressed about like having fog, you know, outside the house but not inside the house. So this is sort of like making that type of feature more available to everybody. Let's see. Let me see if there's any questions I can answer about this. VT Tom asks, I hope it'll be implemented in a user-friendly way. Yeah, I mean, certainly like we will probably make it user-friendly as part of like scene configuration at some point. The thing is there's quite a lot of like advanced options about how you might implement the mask. And so it could be like a lot of options to configure. And so starting with API only makes sense. Of course, I'm sure almost as soon as this is out, there will be like some module that's like scene masker, and you can use the scene masker module to like configure what you want your mask to be with a UI and whatnot. So if we do it in the UI, it'll be great. If we don't do it in the UI, I'm very certain there will be a little lightweight module that shows up almost immediately that serves that purpose. Not to say that I'm trying to shirk responsibility for doing it. I do think it would be nice for us to do that ourselves. It's R asks, could potentially different colors mask different effects if multiple effects are present? Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right, in fact. So you have three color channels in your mask image. So you could support up to 3 different masks with a single image texture if you wanted to. If you wanted to use an RGB texture, you could have like one mask shape on the red channel, you could have a different mask shape on the green channel, you could have a different mask shape on the blue channel. And when you configure your weather effects, now this configuration is applying the same mask to every weather effect, but there is a more advanced API where you can configure a mask on a per weather effect basis. And that more advanced API would let you say, I want to use the blue channel for this effect, and I want to use the red channel for this effect, and I want to use the green channel for this effect. And so that can get you more advanced mileage out of your single mask texture if you want, which is a really clever thing that you could do. Florad asks, will this be documented as a recipe somewhere? Yeah, it should be. Let me see if I can find the Git issue here. API entry point for terrain masks. Yeah, I did put this code basically in there is the recipe in the Git issue, Florian, with example usage that we can maybe provide some more examples here and perhaps get that into our API docs as well. Claude, let's see. Claude Kenny lol asks, sorry, can you verify if there will be a non-scripty way to apply a mask to a scene? Not right now, but that's what I was saying that I hope that we will add. I think that it would be good for us to make this like UI configurable, and so hopefully that's something that we'll do during the testing phase. Certainly that could make it, more user-friendly to define that mask. Grape Juice asks, is masking only applied on weather? This type of masking is only applied on weather, yes. There are other techniques for masking or for altering the shape of light sources. For example, I don't know if you're already aware of this or not, but light sources now support boundary shapes. So any light source can have additional shape constraints applied to it. So you could constrain the shape of a light source with the shape of a polygon. That sort of thing is already supported in the API, Grape Juice. So there's already some different approaches that can be used to apply masking to certain lights. Question from Suspect: can this type of masking be used for scene audio volume? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you're thinking with that. I guess maybe it could be that there's a sound effect attached to the weather, and if your token is outside, you would hear the weather sound, and if you're inside, you would not hear the weather sound. I love that idea, and I think that one thing that I've wanted us to do for a while is to add sound effect support to weather effects, so that when you choose a weather effect blizzard, you should be able to also get the sound effect of the blizzard. Currently, that's not something we support. Our weather effects don't have an audio channel at the moment, but the desire for them to have an audio channel is definitely there. And if and when we add an audio channel to weather effects, I think we would definitely use masking like this to say play the weather effect audio if you're outside, but not if you're inside, or inside at a reduced volume or something like that. We're not there yet on that, but that's definitely the direction that we might be going with that. Just catching up a little bit. Question from Cozy Maps. Hey, Cozy Maps, love your work. Are there any plans in the near future to make different levels for the walls? Yeah, so this was something I commented on a little bit earlier in the stream, but you may have missed it. I want to be careful about the word plan because so we want to do this. We very much have a lot of thoughts and plans with regards to the concept of scene levels and multi-level functionality for scenes. This is something that definitely will exist in Foundry VTT at some point. It's not something that will exist in Foundry VTT for V11. Will it be in V12? I don't know. It's going to depend a lot on prioritization and a lot of discussions and things like that. So it's absolutely a desired thing that we want to do, but it's a matter of choosing the right moment and prioritization to approach it. And so we'll see. But yes, it's certainly something that is planned, but in a long-term sort of abstract sense. Okay, let's see. All right, trying to catch up. Question from the Duck, or actually, question from Guitar Guy Nick, and then I'll get to the next one. Will there be a terrain feature added to the canvas? Is that planned in the future for setting difficult terrain distances, height references? Yeah, I'd say this is like a little bit of a less concrete plan than the one with, say, multi-level scenes that I just described. But yeah, I think, there's also a desire to be able to designate that certain areas of the scene are like difficult terrain. Certainly this is something that we would like to be able to do. So yeah, I think, to answer your question, hopefully, but probably at a lower priority than scene levels, I would say. The Duck Duck Quack asks, question, do you have plans to start adding filters and means of organizing modules? Yeah, we talked about this earlier in the stream, so I won't rehash too much, but yeah, we talked about that some filtering options would be nice. Would it be possible to change the color of the weather effect? Yes, via the API. No, not via the UI at the moment. I think eventually what we want to do with a better weather, and this was something that was on our Patreon feature vote that was not the winning option, but improved environment and improved weather effects is something that we care a lot about doing at some point. That would incorporate things like adding sound to weather, adding more color options or intensity options, or like, this particular snowstorm, it's sort of like falling, northwest to southeast is like the direction of the flurries, but we could add like an angle where you can choose like which direction should the snow be going in, like how intense should it be, how much fog. We could make these weather effects far more configurable to where you could have a lot of control over like what they do. It's just a pretty big task. It's something we'd love to do. We just have to figure out the right moment to prioritize it. All right. Let me see. Any more questions? Question from Rmax Beats. Looking at lights gave me a question. I remember community lighting had some very cool light effects by Blitz, animation stuff like audio activated lights. We have tons of we have tons of light animations already. I don't know, maybe you might be aware of that or might not, but we have lots of light animations to choose from already. You're talking about audio activated lights. I don't really know about that. That's not something we've talked about, but it sounds interesting. All right, yeah, let me move on a little bit. So some other things I wanted to showcase in this particular scene is a big improvement we made to doors, which is very exciting. So in V11, if I go to the walls layer, each door can now have a door sound set associated with it. So for any wall that's a door, like if the wall is not a door, it's just going to look like this. But for a wall that is a door, there's some extra options where you can choose the door sound set that applies to that door. So here, this door on this map is sort of like a wooden door. So I'll just start with like basic wood as a demo of what this looks like. When the door is configured as a basic wood door, let me show a couple of the things that happen when you interact with it. So right now it's locked. I'm going to pause the music so that there's nothing else playing right now. When attempting to open a locked door, it sounds like this. Okay, pretty familiar, sort of similar to the current sound effect there. Let's unlock a door. Hopefully you're hearing that. Hopefully it's not too quiet. You hear a sound effect of unlocking. I wonder if it's linked. I wonder which volume slider it's linked to. It should be linked to interface. It's a little hard to hear. Let me see if I can. I'm trying to think what I could do to make it louder. I'm not sure actually. Well, tell you what. I'm just gonna not. I'm gonna not. Might just be OBS setting. Okay, let me pull it over here and just crank it real quick. Oh, it's already. Sorry, it's already at its highest, guys. I'm sorry. I'll just talk. I'm just gonna talk quietly for a minute so that you all can turn your volume up. I'll speak softly so I don't deafen you, and you can turn your volume up for a minute, and I'll play these door sounds, ASMR edition. Here we go. So that's the basic wooden door sound. We have some other wooden, like a creaky wooden door. I can do that one. We've also got support for some great kind of futuristic door types. So here's like you can imagine we're on a starship, and here's like a hydraulic closing door. We've also got some like an industrial metal door. Lots of good options here. I think there's like a sliding metal door. I really like this one. Anyways, this is the sort of thing that we've added core support for these 9 different door sound sets. All right, I'm going to start talking a little bit louder now, so I'm not intentionally being, ASMR mode. So if you had me cranked up, you can just turn it back down just a little bit, increasing the volume level, not wanting to blow anyone's headphones out. We added support for these 9 different door sounds, and really great work and kudos to Roman on our team who cooked up the different door sound sets on pretty short notice for this feature. But most importantly, these door sound sets can very easily be extended by systems, modules. You can extend them yourself in your world. All you have to do to define a new door set is in the config object, the client-side config object under wall, there is a door sounds object. And so you can register your own door sound sets to have any sort of door sound set that you want. So I'm sure there will be some great modules that add additional options here. And it's quite simple to add your own options that then once they're registered here, those options will be available for you under this dropdown, and you can have your own sound palettes for however you want your own doors to work. So yeah, very excited to have this feature added, and sort of much like adding like UI support to configure terrain mask in the UI. I suspect at some point we'll want to add like UI support to configure door sounds in the UI, but a lot of these features sort of start as API first, and then once they're in the API, we can start thinking about adding a UI support for them as well. All right, let's see. Scrolling back up so I can answer some questions. Support for door image. It's a nice feature request, but it's not part of what we have done here. But it's a nice feature request that would be cool to do at some point. Door animations when? Someday in the future, probably. Just a matter of time, I guess, I would think. Possible to add skill checks to certain doors. Yes, it's possible. It's not possible via what I've just showed you in the core software, but the API makes everything possible. It is definitely possible to attach skill checks to doors. You just would have to script that yourself. Let's see. All right. Spice King asks, can we get it to pick a random one from an array of strings? No. But I like that suggestion, and so I think that what we should do, if there's someone on the team who is listening and can help me with this so that we remember it, I think it would be nice for us to add the option for each of these to be an array, where if it is an array, we might randomly choose one from the array instead of... so we could support for each of these door sound definitions, we could support either like string or array of strings. I think that would be a pretty easy extension for us to make. And yeah, I'm supportive of that concept. So yeah, let's get that tracked. All right, let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to some other changes. Those are the highlights. I've taken quite a long time to get to the highlights, but let me get into some of the more nitty-gritty changes that we've made in Dev 2. I'm just going to kind of run through these just so that there's a visual record of me talking about them. And yeah, I'll just, without further ado, I guess we can change the scene up for some variety here. There are a couple breaking changes, although I want to emphasize to the API developers in the audience that, well, I hope this is right as I read through these. I'm pretty sure, and I'll confirm after I read through these, but I don't think any of these breaking changes are immediately breaking. I think all of these are breaking in the context of like, by v13, something might have to change. So the first one, accessing .actor.uuid for unlinked tokens now returns the UUID of the synthetic actor rather than the token document that governs it. So that is a byproduct of our new approach to solving unlinked tokens with the synthetic actor and the actor delta. It's a really good system, and for the most part, if you're using UUIDs, you don't have to change anything. You just keep using UUIDs and everything will sort of work out for you. But exactly which UUID string is returned by token.actor.uuid is now a little bit different. Introduce the visibility field for Compendium pack definitions, which modifies and allows more granular control over which user roles can see a pack in the Compendium sidebar. So what this means is that previously in, say, a module manifest, you would be able to declare something like the following. For a Compendium pack, you might previously declare something like private true, to imply that like this Compendium pack by default should be only visible to Game Master users. So this key private is now deprecated. It still works. There's backwards compatible support kept for it, but instead of private, there is a new field called visibility, where I could do something like Game Master or none or players or trusted, and depending on the visibility level, which corresponds to different user roles, users of that role or greater will be able to see that Compendium pack in the sidebar. So for example, if I do visibility trusted, then players who have, trusted player status would be able to see the compendium pack, and players that do not have, that are just regular players, would not be able to see that compendium pack. So it's a more granular visibility control than just the private Boolean that previously existed. Now, if you had private true, like I said, this will get automatically migrated. You don't have to change anything right now. There's backwards compatibility here, at least for a time. Another breaking change: deprecated the old style pending operations from the canvas, replaced them with new style render flags. That's a pretty internal change. I don't really think this is going to affect, well, I dare not say anyone, because I'm sure there's probably someone out there that this affects, but this is pretty low level internal stuff that I don't really expect it to have a big blast radius. Although some of you might be affected by this. Improved API design for the Canvas document mixin to avoid automatically adding an associated placeable object in the Canvas layer. Okay, this is one where there is not a backwards compatibility. This just is like a behavior change that is just sort of happening. I don't expect this to really affect many people. I know I'm saying that a lot, I guess, but there's a create object method in the placeables layer that used to previously, when using this method to create an object, it would also automatically and immediately add that object to the layer. That behavior is now left to the calling user. So instead of it automatically happening, it's now up to the caller of this function to decide if you want to add the created object to the container. So this just gives more control, because previously you had no control. Like if you called this function, it was going to happen whether you wanted it or not. So this is just an API change that adds a little bit more rationalization to the way that you interact with these objects, where if you want to use this create object helper method, you then have control of what to do with the return value rather than it just happening automatically. Anyways, that's it. That's all it is. Simplified the logic used to manage token animation by taking advantage of the new token mesh data structure. I'm not actually sure why this is labeled a breaking change. Let me think about, what's it say? There's no meaningful API change here, but there is one minor change which is technically breaking. Token get display attributes has been moved to token mesh get display attributes. Okay, there is a backwards compatible shim. There's a backwards compatible layer for that, but yes, if you were previously calling token get display attributes, that is now token mesh get display attributes. Again, this is pretty minor stuff. Or so I claim, wink, wink. The weather container instance at canvas weather is now removed and combined with the parent weather effects container layer directly. So we had a foundryism. I know those of you who have been around long enough to, joke with me about data or whatever. We had another one of those sorts of things where canvas.weather.weather was like a weather container inside the weather layer. It turned out that we don't actually need the inner container. We only need the weather layer. So instead of canvas.weather.weather, it's just canvas.weather now. So so that's a simplification. Now there is a sort of backwards compatible redirect where if you reference canvas.weather.weather, it just kind of takes you back and most of your code should continue to work, and there's a deprecation warning. But it is technically a breaking change. Secret Fire's got me on that. So those are the breaking changes. Nothing too dramatic in this release. This is what we intend to be our final. This is our final development phase release, API development phase release. So what that means is that after this point, we're going to really avoid changing the API or making additional breaking changes. Now, if there's something that like we encounter between now and v11 stable that's like we cannot release v11 stable unless we make this change, we will. But any further breaking changes will be held to an exceptionally high standard, and I don't expect there to be any more after this point. So the goal for being here at the end of the API development phase is that there should be no further breaking changes to the API after this point. Our goal is that once we reach this milestone, module and system devs should feel like this is the API that v11 is going to have. We might fix bugs, but we're not going to make any alterations to it. So, yeah, so, you know, I think that what that hopefully will mean for system and module developers is that as we are now converging towards v11 stable, this would be a point in time where you should feel confident in your ability to, you know, start thinking about module updates or system updates if you want. I'm not going to put pressure on you. If you want to, this is a moment where you could start thinking about that, and you should be protected from any further churn of like, well, this feature got really redesigned or something between now and stable. All right, let's see. So non-breaking change, other stuff that I can run through. Architecture, infrastructure, we got a better build of classic level that now works for certain ARM, I think is like ARM v8 or something. I forget exactly which ARM, but it's a certain type of Raspberry Pi that our previous build dropped out of compatibility with and now is back to compatible with. There are some ARM builds that this is not compatible with. And so we have some documentation about what that list is. And if you have a device or a server or something that falls into that category, there is a workaround that you can use, but you will have to use the workaround. We talked about door sounds. We talked about redesign of the Compendium sidebar tab. Systems can now easily configure which attributes are available for tracking on tokens. So this is like when you go into token config, like which are the options presented under attribute bars for tracking. It's easier in the API to configure this now by registering a config setting, which defines the list of trackable attributes. So that's a little bit of a nice improvement. We talked about improvements to Compendium pack design, toggling the sort mode of top-level directory entries, although I have to say I have a little bit of suspicion about whether this is working properly or not. I think it might be intended to work properly, but I think it is perhaps not working the way that we intend. I don't know. I'm not sure. Need to look into it. I have some suspicion, though. But the intention is that this new toggle at the top of each directory. Oh, looks like it is sorting. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I think it was user error. So this toggle will change between alphabetical sort and manual sort for everything in the sidebar. So here's like the manual sort where I put places of interest first, and you know, O comes earlier, and then if I go to alphabetical sort, it all switches to alphabetical. Sorry, user error in demonstrating the new feature. We talked about new view modes for the v11 setup theme, just some little like UI fixes. Font Awesome, the Font Awesome library has been upgraded to 6.4.0, so there's some new icons available for everybody to use. We improved the performance of square grid rendering. We were previously using multiple graphics objects with a simple geometry per object, and we've switched to using a single graphics object with a more complex geometry. It used to be, I think, in an earlier version of Pixie that using more graphics objects with simpler geometries was a better call for performance. And at some point, I think the ground rules for that have changed, and it is now better to use a single graphics with a more complex geometry. And so that's what we've done. And it should be a little performance boost for all scenes that are using square grid. Improve the cached rendering framework by allowing extra options during construction. So you can customize like what texture format the cache texture uses. That's a pretty nice thing. Basically what that means is if you have a cached texture or a mask texture or something that needs only one channel, like only red channel, you can configure it as like a single channel texture. And so it occupies a lot less space in memory and is more efficient. Made some API updates to the sprite mesh class. I talked about support for world and system thumbnail images. I talked about support for creating the module on the setup screen. I didn't talk about this one yet. So one thing that's new is we made it easier for content creators who are making battle maps and packaging those maps into Compendium packs to create thumbnail images for their maps that are able to be distributed along with their module. So now when you open a Compendium pack of scenes, say like this is me and I'm making my Battle Maps Compendium pack. Once I put a scene into the Compendium pack, if it's unlocked, I now have the option to generate thumbnail images for each scene. When I generate thumbnail images for the scene that is inside a Compendium pack that's owned by a module, those thumbnail images are going to be created inside the module's path structure. So like the thumbnail images of the scenes in the Compendium will be packaged with the module. And so it'll make it easier for those scene thumbnails to be shipped alongside the module with the scenes. This is something that's been like a pain point for a little bit of time for content creators. And so I'm happy to have a sort of, I don't know if this is the full and final solution to this pain point. Like there might be more we can do here, but as a next step, this is much better because when I generate a thumbnail image for these scenes, it's going to put that thumbnail in my module. All right, I'm going to pause here at the end of this section before I start talking about API improvements. So let me try and get some questions from the audience. Claude Kenny, lol. I have lots of points and nothing to do with them. Well, you got me to read that on stream, so I guess that counts for something. Saifa asks, is there a reason... Oh, I lost it. Where'd it go? Saifa asks, is there a reason to not do the Compendium thumbnail within module generation by default rather than needing to do it manually? Possibly, yes, there is possibly a reason to do that. There's certain situations where you might want to keep the prior scene thumbnail in place, and so it's not necessarily always correct to do that. Shemetz asks, maybe there should be a button to generate the thumbnail images for everything in the pack all at once. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. That's Matt on our team. That's his proposal, and so I think that's a good idea that we've already been thinking about. It just didn't make it for this release. Question from 117KK. I don't know if that has a phoneticization or not, but I'll just go with 117KK. Any thoughts on implementing manual dice rolling into Core Foundry, i.e. rolling real dice on your desk and inputting the result into a prompt in Foundry? Yes, actually. So as some of you may know, we have a tradition on the team called Free Project Friday, where on the last Friday of every month, we have kind of a sort of like work on a personal passion project that isn't necessarily related to our, team prioritization. And one of the things that Cody has been working on recently has a little bit to do with manual dice rolling. So there's a couple of peripheral devices now that can integrate with Foundry VTT. So GoDice is a cool example that we're working on. And then also anticipation of upcoming, Pixels dice release, as well as just, conventional, old school dice that you can roll at your desk, all of which kind of involve asynchronous rolling outside the context of the VTT. So one of the things that Cody's working on is a workflow to support that sort of manual dice rolling, where you can be prompted to enter your result if it's like truly manual, or if it's using like a Bluetooth dice. If you set it to that mode, it can like automatically pick up those results. Now, I don't want to overpromise or commit Cody to any certain work by any certain amount of time. This is kind of a side project that we're working on, but it is something that is in our thoughts and is something that is being worked on a little bit behind the scenes. So I expect that that will be added to Foundry as a core feature at some point in the future. Mute Foxy asks, for modules with multiple compendiums, can they be included inside a folder in the module itself so that a million compendiums don't suddenly appear at the root of the user's UI? Not right now, although there are some tools for doing that right now, in terms of like the module could include like a one-time setup script that like when the module is loaded for the first time, it does all of that organization. We have an issue where we'd like to make it possible in the package manifest to be able to declare like a folder for each pack here in the manifest. We didn't get that feature done in time for Dev 2, but it is still in our thinking for the long term, whether it's later in V11 or in a future update. Thorium Dragon asks, will future editions of Foundry support allowing players to create actors under their control by way of a spell or script to allow summoning a token? So I would say that this feature sort of already exists, although there might be some barriers that need to be broken down in order to make it work better for you. In permission control, like when you configure permissions for the world, one of the things that's a different permission that can be configured is whether users have the ability to create new actors or not. You can grant your players permission to create actors themselves, and if they have that permission, they would be able to create those sorts of summoned creatures. Now, part of it is about creating the actor, part of it is also about creating a token. So the analog, the other part of what you're describing is, say, creating new tokens, which is a separate permission. So if your players can create tokens, they can then like place a token themselves onto the scene for things like summoned creatures. So there should be some support for this already, although there might be some workflows that have a little bit of friction that we can hopefully improve upon. Question from Endless Nights. Placeable object note can currently reference a journal entry and then a journal entry page. Do you think it would be also possible to also reference the headers option of the journal entry page? This has been a bit of a back and forth topic, I would say. Nothing is permanently ruled out, for all time or anything, but I think at the moment it is a conscious decision to allow those to be document links and not header links. I think it works more elegantly to be focused on, so like here's the new Tom Cardos's new like updated winter Ostenwald map. These links, it works, I think, better to have them focus on a certain page than needing to pull a certain header inside that page, because it allows for these to be foreign document links, which have some sort of side effects for testing permission, visibility. If we're talking about a header link, it does get to be a little bit more complex. So there is a purpose to the current limitation in that design, although I understand why some folks would prefer to have headers. It is my opinion and the kind of guiding advice that we would give for people creating content for Foundry, that if you have separate, distinct pinned locations, that those separate, distinct pinned locations would be different pages of a journal entry. That is kind of the intended design there. Let's see. Spina's Style asks, do you believe in the future there will be faster loading times swapping between scenes? Well, I do believe that, and the reason I believe that is because computers are getting faster and internet is getting faster. The reason that scene loading is not instantaneous is A, your computer is slow, no offense. B, your internet is slow, again, no offense. one of those two things is true if scene loading is slow. If your internet is fast and if your computer is fast, scene loading is fast. It's just that those are the two things that cause loading a scene to take some time. And the larger the textures that are used, the more bandwidth you need to load it, the more CPU you need to load it. These are just kind of realities of computing. And so ultimately what will make scene loading faster is improvements in those areas. Question from Mute Foxy. In V10, when a user is banned, a warning appears in the console and the user is not banned. Yeah, we made some fixes for this in V11, Foxy. I actually handled that issue myself. That is in our bug fix notes of this update. Grape Juice asks about HTTP 3 when. Good question. So there's a couple of things, and I apologize, this is a little bit of a technical digression, but I know some of you who watch these streams are interested in technical digressions, so I will indulge you. There's a couple of directions we can go with the core software. Currently, the core software uses Express.js as the HTTP server that we use. Now, Express.js out of the box only supports HTTP 1, doesn't even support HTTP 2. There's a lot of contention in the Node.js developer community about this. There's a lot of dissatisfaction about this. And there's a kind of tension between, like, is Express the problem, or is it some of these HTTP libraries that need to be made compatible with Express, or like how does that start to work? And so there's a couple of things that could happen. One thing that could happen is that there is a good HTTP 3 or HTTP 2 implementation that is out of the box compatible with Express. And if that happens, we will use it. The other thing that could happen is that we decide that Express is just lagging too far behind other HTTP servers, and so we switch to using a different framework for handling HTTP responses and requests. And other frameworks would either support HTTP 2 out of the box or would support HTTP 3, which is a new protocol that is more similar to WebSocket than to other things. So anyways, there's like a range of things that are possible, and we wouldn't do this in V11, but, you know, for example, in V11 we did, and you know, for those of you who don't know, one of the most significant things that we've done in V11 is we've replaced our database backend. We've replaced our database technology with a new database. It's not out of the question for us to replace Express with a different HTTP server. In fact, that would be actually probably a much lesser change than swapping our database. We wouldn't do it in V11, but we might do it in V12. We might do it beyond. Getting to HTTP 2 at least, or ideally HTTP 3 if it becomes well supported, I think that's a very noble goal, and that would help users who are self-hosting Foundry a lot. There are, I believe, some technical requirements, however, for HTTP 2, I know, and I think for HTTP 3 that you have to have an SSL certificate, and making sure that the user has a SSL certificate for a self-hosted Electron app is not easily solved. I don't know if it can be solved. It probably can be solved somehow. It's certainly not easily solved. And so that has kind of diluted some of our incentive to move away from HTTP 1 because we can't move past it anyways for the default Electron app that doesn't have a SSL certificate out of the box. Yeah, Kalad, the DB change was big. The DB change was a big effort. Changing Express to something else, it would be an effort, but it would not be as large an effort. Okay, that's my technical digression. I didn't prepare an answer to that, so I may have neglected to mention something or said something that isn't quite correct or whatnot, but that's my impromptu perspective on the situation. Let's talk about API improvements that are included in this particular update. It's now possible to pass arbitrary arguments to script macros and capture their return values. So this just makes our macro system a little bit more powerful because it can take in arbitrary args and it can do things with those args and it can return something back to the calling scope. And so, yeah, that's pretty cool. Definitely know some folks are excited about that. Let's see, updated the PDF.js library. We updated a bunch of dependencies, actually. There, like Pixie got updated, Electron got an update. Just that probably shows up a couple places. Active effects added by an item can now be configured to transfer to the actor or to remain on the item. So this is an optional thing that historically those active effects have had to transfer because we haven't had historical support for grandchild documents, but now that we do have full hierarchical support for grandchild documents, there's nothing that requires the active effect to transfer from the item to the actor. It's perfectly fine for the active effect to stay on the item, on the actor. In fact, it has a lot of advantages of the active effect staying on the item, on the actor. So it's pretty cool to be able to disable this like legacy effect transferal, and it's gated behind a config flag so that if your system or modules still require those active effects to be transferred, you can continue to preserve that behavior, but otherwise they will not be. Let's see. Added support for registering a custom application to view the contents of the compendium collection. So for example, in 5e, the like 5e rules compendium has like a custom UI for the rules. This makes it easier to register a custom app for saying like, I want this particular compendium pack to be displayed using a particular application. So you used to have to do this with like a hook and a little trick to like push an application into the apps array. It was kind of like a hidden backdoor way of accomplishing it. It's just more explicit now, the mechanism to register like a custom compendium browser app. I talked about multiple setup themes. That's a work in progress, but it's more of a framework. Addressed a number of issues regarding unlinked token actors and our new DB architecture. This issue really undersells the Herculean amount of work that Kim did this update. I think it's really not fair to Kim that he gets like just this one line item. We probably should have hyped this one up a little bit. Kim did spectacular work to really deep dive and address a number of the remaining sharp edges of the unlinked token actor implementation, and I'm super, super happy with where that has ended up. It is really smooth, and it has great parity with the rest of our UI, rest of our API. This feels like a huge relief to me to be able to unburden ourselves of some of this technical debt that we've been carrying for a while. Yeah, the issue itself is an epic that accomplished like all of this stuff, as Matt points out. And so this work to address tech debt on unlinked actors is like a really, really big endeavor. Let's see. These are pretty uninteresting. Render flags are now generalized using a mix-in, which is applied to both placeable object and perception manager. A cool thing about this is if you have a use case for doing just-in-time rendering for a display object on the canvas, you can decorate your own display object to have render flags using the render flags mix-in, and you can use the render flag framework to record a set of like Boolean flags that you can use for just-in-time rendering of a particular change. So the benefit here would be like, suppose whenever you change a certain attribute of your display object, there's a fairly heavyweight recomputation that needs to happen as a result. Render flags allow you to kind of accumulate changes up to the point that a new render frame needs to be handled, and then do the workflow just once. So imagine like in a loop, something was setting like my fancy display object dot z index and color something else. Like when you change these properties, it could be that there's like downstream workflows that need to change and that they're expensive. You can use this render flags if you want as a way to kind of govern deduping that work so that you only do it once. And that's something that we use pretty extensively now on the canvas to help us do the minimum amount of work at the last responsible moment. There's lots of impacts and consequences of this. For example, like drawing measured templates has this sort of like smoothness about it now, where like the highlighting of the grid, we don't necessarily do that, recompute the highlighting every time that the drag, event is fired, but we do schedule that, re-rendering, that recomputation of the grid highlight each time that a frame is about to be rendered. So like each time, based on your frame rate, each time we're rendering a new frame, we're recomputing just in time for that frame to be rendered. We're recomputing what the AOE of the template is. And so, we get like a certain performance improvement and a certain smoothness of this like template creation process as a result. It's really good for performance. Added canvas dimensions, distance pixels as a pre-computed ratio. It's helpful for people who need it. Improve how primary canvas objects are handled and move their functionality out of the parent object. This is actually another big one that probably is like undersold in our patch notes. We now have the ability to render primary canvas objects like token mesh, tile mesh, purely programmatically without needing a corresponding document that's upstream of them. It used to be that in order to say render a tile on the canvas, you had to first create a tile document. From that tile document, you had to get a tile placeable object. From that tile placeable object, you had to get a tile mesh, and then you can finally render your tile mesh into the primary canvas group. Now you can cut out all of that unnecessary upstream workflow if you're just purely programmatically rendering stuff. Like say I am programmatically rendering a scene and I want to put some like spinning blade traps in the scene. I can render those spinning blade traps just using a tile mesh directly. I don't have to have a tile document. If I'm doing it programmatically, I don't need the document. I don't need the placeable object. All I need is the tile mesh. This refactoring allows you to go straight to those primary canvas group rendered objects and render them directly. That applies to token, that applies to tile, that applies to drawing. Obviously, most of the time you do want those objects to be backed by a document store so that you have a way to persist data and a way to edit it and a way to interact with it. But this new framework has a much better separation of concerns about like what is responsible for what task. So the document is responsible for data persistence and data validation. The document is the data model that helps us make sure we have the right data and that we store that data to disk. The placeable object is an interaction layer that gives us a framework and UI UX for changing the document. So, when we have a token, the underlying token data is the document. The ability to like have this like token HUD and drag and drop the token, this like UX is all provided by the placeable object, which gives it gives an interface into controlling the document data. But the actual mesh that's rendered on the canvas is just a token mesh. So the underlying appearance of the token, for example, that gets like what gets animated when we, change the token's size, like what's actually getting animated on the canvas here is the token mesh. And that can now be created just purely programmatically without needing the upstream infrastructure. I don't really know how best to like celebrate that, but I think it's a really big change. Secret Fire worked really hard on this change throughout Dev 2, and this was like one of the biggest features that he delivered in this milestone. It's a really big edition that has a lot of like important things. That and the, like the weather masking, terrain masking, stuff like that. But doing this refactor for primary canvas objects is a big improvement. Added support for Canvas Animate to understand how to animate colors directly without needing extra code. So this is cool. Like now when we animate like a token tint, like we can smoothly animate the tint from like one color to another, and the like animation function for changing tokens knows kind of directly how to work with those colors. Like it doesn't need any special fancy code for that. It's just part of the Canvas animation framework that it knows how to do color animations. So less code for you to write, more things that Foundry does just for free. One thing that I think is it's a small change with a really big value for the API. Document create, update, delete operations can now be canceled by returning false in the underscore pre method of the document class. It used to be that only hooks had the ability to cancel a workflow in this way, where like a pre-update token hook could return false and say, no, I'm going to take over this. Don't do the normal workflow, cancel that workflow. I'm going to do something bespoke. Now, any code that subclasses those document class can now cancel those workflows in the pre-methods. They don't have to use a hook. You can have that level of control just in the underscore pre methods of the document class. This is a pretty big deal. It's a small change, but it's a change that has a lot of benefit. And so, I'm excited that we managed to make that alteration. Update to Pixie, refactored the directory tree building logic out of the sidebar directory class into the directory collection mixin. This redesign was part of what was necessary in order to support us doing folders for Compendium packs here in the sidebar, because we needed to have the directory behavior on things that was not a collection of documents. And so this was some refactoring that enabled us to do that in a really maintainable way. This is partly an API change, partly maybe a bug fix. I don't know, depending on how you look at it. Foundry utils expand object would previously inadvisedly attempt to expand, complex class instances. It now only attempts to expand sort of basic objects. And if it encounters a complex object, it just treats that complex object as given. So that's an important change. And then we have a bunch of bug fixes. I think bug fixes are probably not like exciting enough for me to read one by one. I think I encourage you, if you're interested, to just read through the bullet point list of bug fixes that we included in this release. There's some really good bugs that have been squashed. There are more bugs still to come, though. I want to talk a little bit briefly about what's next for us. So, for example, what have we done at this point? If I pull up some of our metrics, milestone completion, here we are with our milestones. These aren't quite in the implementation order, but as you can see, V11 prototype 1, Dev 1 and Dev 2 all were pretty similar sized in terms of the amount of issue weight that we delivered in each of those milestones. Prototype 2 was a really heavy one because that's where most of the database refactoring and some of the like big stuff came in prototype 2. What this means in terms of where we are is here in testing 1, these are all of the V11 issues that we have that are still left. So everything that's left for V11 is less than what we've done in any of the last 3 milestones, which is really encouraging because it means that we are getting down to almost complete with regards to what needs to go into V11. Now, as we are in the user testing phase, I'm expecting we're going to get a lot of helpful bug reports that will obviously like increase the number of issues that we need to solve. And so we're expecting that, but even accounting for the likelihood that we're going to get a lot more issues, created over the next couple weeks, I think we are in a really good place to be converging on complete for V11. So what we have left right now is 59 issues. They're mostly bug fixes or like little UI UX things, and we're going to really focus on getting as many of those done as possible. And then in the meantime, we're going to, intake any bug reports that come through the community. We'll try and tackle that really aggressively. I think we're going to do 2, maybe 3 rounds of testing releases. And then once we feel like we're done with, once we've fixed the bugs that we know about, and once we've gotten through those rounds of testing releases, we will be preparing a stable release of V11 that we'll be recommending for everyone to embrace. So that's the roadmap that's coming up, and it's probably not going to be too long. I think probably only a month from here out. So if you've been thinking about like when to anticipate V11, you're probably looking at about a month from where we are now. All right, let me take some questions, and then I've been going here for 2 hours, so I think I'm going to wrap up pretty soon, but let me do about maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes of questions before I go, and then we'll call it a day. So keep hitting your questions this way, and I will get through as many as I can. Question from Sytha: does this fix the issue where you can't import a scene with tokens on it correctly from a module created in V10? I lost a little bit of the context in which that question was asked, so I don't know, Sytha. If your question is about issues with unlinked tokens, it's possible that has been fixed, but I don't know for sure. Tasman asks, bit off topic, sorry about that. Curious if you have thoughts about the Foundry lightweight client. I have some players that have a hard time running Foundry with various browsers. Do you think I should recommend it to them as an alternative? So Foundry lightweight client isn't made by us. And so we can't really, I wouldn't say like we reject it or we don't support it or whatnot, but we can't really stand by it as like, this is a way that we recommend to use Foundry VTT. We don't make that client. We have debated and evaluated in the past creating a standalone client, and that may be something that we do in the future, but for the time being, that's not something that our team makes, and so it's something that I would be wary for us to endorse, I guess. But certainly you can try it, and ultimately it's not that complicated. It's sort of a lightweight electron wrapper that's like just chromium and nothing else, and so conceptually it's not like irresponsible to try that out. You can certainly give it a try and see if it makes a difference for you. Question from Team is Better. Some of my players have low-powered devices. Is there or can there be a supported guide to assist users in configuring low-spec devices? Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got this in our knowledge base, but if we don't, it's certainly something we should add. The most important thing, Team is Better, that you'll want to look into is in the settings menu, each user can choose a performance mode that is going to affect the intensity and complexity of canvas rendering. So for users with low-powered devices, you should definitely encourage them to set this performance mode to like low. You also should probably encourage them to turn down their maximum frame rate. Turning down the maximum frame rate will make the canvas like a little bit less smooth, but it will have some big performance. It could have some big performance improvements in terms of working well with lower powered devices. Another thing that's perhaps really important to handle is look into this pixel resolution scaling setting, because if it happens that low powered device also has a high pixel density display, like a Retina display, this can be a double whammy, because one, you're not on a super powerful device to begin with, and the Retina display can be like a X4 increase in the number of effective pixels that need to be rendered. So this can be a real performance killer if that applies to you. So if they're on that sort of device, Retina display, probably want to turn this off. Those are really it. I think mostly it's like those features are the ones that kind of give you the ability to work better on low power devices. Question from Rabulius about any hint as to V12's focus. Well, we haven't decided yet, and so I couldn't really hint, because a hint would sort of imply that it's been decided and here's a teaser. There are some things that are on my mind. One is that we've been working hard on this UI redesign of the setup menu. Part of this UI redesign of the setup menu is going to start coming to the rest of the VTT as an opt-in thing starting in V12. So in V12, like, the game UI is going to still be what it is today by default, but there will be in V12 the ability to opt in to like the new UI. And probably opting into the new UI is going to be really awful and janky and broken and non-functional, because systems and modules that are built for the current UI. And when we just throw those systems and modules in the same pool with the new UI, it's probably not going to work so great. So we're going to have to manage this process really carefully. And so in V12, it's going to be like the first phase of that, like giving people the ability to opt in and test the new UI in the game. But that's not the default. It's the default is going to be you still have the old UI. And then V13, V14, and beyond will gradually kind of like step up the process of eventually migrating everything to the new UI. So that's one thing. Beyond that, it's going to be a lot of careful thought about, about what features we want to do, what we want to focus on. We'll have a Patreon feature vote. I'm sure there's going to be kind of all kinds of thought about what our users want us to do. And so that I guess that's the only hint I can really give right now. Question from Adam Danes. Serious question. What kinds of games have you been into yourself for fun? I've been catching up. I don't have a lot of gaming time these days, but I've been catching up on some games that are in my like to playlist that I like owned the game in Steam, but I've like never played it. So I played Deathloop recently. I bought that game a while ago and never played it. So I played Deathloop. I enjoyed it. It's pretty cool. I finished that, and then I moved on to Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a game I've always wanted to play, but I'm very much like a PC gamer. I don't have a PlayStation, so a lot of the PlayStation exclusives like Horizon, like Last of Us, which is now out on PC, like these are like coming to PC now, and so like they're kind of all in my to playlist, but I'm playing Horizon Zero Dawn right now and really enjoying it. Mute Foxy asks, are there any plans for... Oh, where'd it go? Any plans for having default macro folders for each player? It's not something we have planned, but it sounds like a potentially nice suggestion that we could consider and explore. No plans for that, though. Shinotama asks about player client. Touched on this briefly. I mean, it's something we've discussed in the past. We may do it in the future, but no. For me to say there's a plan means that we've kind of committed to doing it, and we haven't committed to doing that yet. It's something we think about, though. Mad Sumas asks, going back to active effects being able to remain on the item rather than copied to the actor, how does that work under the hood? Yes, under the hood, there is a change in terms of apply active effects. But ultimately, that sort of effect application logic is, to a certain extent, left to the system to decide. Like, if you have a sword that has an effect on it, should that effect apply to you as the actor, or should it like apply to your target when you hit them with the sword? It's sort of left up to the system to decide how to interpret effects on items. So certainly like the apply active effects workflow can address effects in items, but it is up to the game system ultimately to decide, like, is that the appropriate thing to do or not. Mestre Digital asks, more icons in V11? No more icons in V11, sorry, maybe in the future. Let's see. Atrivion asks, can you add your own fonts to Foundry? Yes, you can add your own fonts. We have we have a font registration API that can allow you to configure some additional fonts to use in the software. So here under game settings, there's a configure additional fonts UI where you can like import certain font files and you can configure those, and then those fonts will be available to use inside the VTT. Let's see. Question from Spina's Style. Do you have a plan for helping GMs with secret roles, for example, in detection automations? I'm not sure I understand that question. Maybe you can elaborate on that for me. I can answer your second question. I have played BioShock. I've played BioShock, BioShock 2, and BioShock Infinite. I think just those three. I don't know if there's a BioShock game other than those three. Those are the three that I've played. Any news on touch device support from Revelo Waldo? Yeah-ish. We overhauled all of our click events to be pointer events, which have a little bit better emulation for touch devices. We also made a couple other improvements that are important for touch. Another thing that's important, Revel Waldo, to note is that like the new V11 setup UI is designed to be sort of fully responsive. So like if we look at it like on an iPhone, like the V11 setup UI works well in a purely like mobile environment. Certainly for things like tablet as well. Like I don't think we're on the verge of offering like phone support, but the desire to like be able to support like tablet behavior is something that we would like to do. So we're trying to put more focus on that sort of like responsive UI for smaller scale devices as part of our UI overhaul, which of course for now only affects the setup menu, but as I mentioned previously, part of V12 will be like making that opt-in and like starting to expose that functionality for the rest of the game environment. And so we'll be working on that as part of that. And I think like one of the biggest hurdles for really like supporting touch is making sure that it has a reasonable UX. It's really hard to do with a software that's as like, I would say feature rich as Foundry's. There's like a lot of stuff that Foundry does. And so that means that there's a lot of stuff that like would need to be supported with touch UI. So it's not a small thing, but yeah, we're working on it. A question from Grape Juice about going back to the HTTP2 or HTTP3. You could provide subdomain certs with Foundry installs so clients won't get self-signed certs. Adding a reverse proxy for static files would solve those issues of the slowness. Well, I'd have to think about this more, but I don't know how to do what you're describing in a self-hosted Electron install environment. I mean, maybe with a very sort of complex, fully customized install script that also installs, say, like a reverse proxy and also installs other things. But like installing an Electron app using the like Electron builder build packaging, like I can't install a reverse proxy as part of that. I'm sure, all things are possible. So like I shouldn't say can't, but like there's not a clear path towards doing that. Let's see. Will D&D 5e and V11 get any dark vision improvements so it works like the game description? Possibly. The D&D 5e repo is an open source repo that to a degree relies on community contribution. So we are looking for developers who are 5e enthusiasts who are also capable Foundry developers to help us move that game system forward. The team and I will be working on it some ourselves, but our main focus for the team is always the core software. And so you know, working with community devs to find opportunities to contribute to the 5e system is something I'd like us, as a goal, I'd like us to do more of and to do a better job with. Question from Pickers 101. There's one target for 2024 you would love to achieve and one you expect to achieve. It's more realistic. Okay, the one that I would love to achieve, that I hope is also expect to achieve, but it's ambitious and therefore not guaranteed. And I have to be careful what I say here. We have a project that we've been working on for, to varying degrees, we've been working on it for about a year now. And the plan is for that project to be done in 2024. So that's my hope. My hope is that it is. It's a big project. It's big. But it's very exciting, and that's my hope. The one that I expect is more realistic. I think event triggers is like one of the main features that Foundry, I've always wanted it to have, and it doesn't have yet, and it's just like always kind of at the tip of it's like at the cusp of prioritization. That, of course, could happen in 2023 because we're going to have V12 at some point in 2023. So I wouldn't rule that out as a 2023 thing. But if it doesn't happen in V12, I will be very disappointed if event triggers doesn't get done by 2024. So yeah, I think that's one that I think is more realistic, event triggers. Question from Mute Foxy. What would be your main tip to a newbie DM that is getting into Foundry module development? I think my main tip would be to try and start with a little quality of life feature that is something about Foundry that you wish would work differently. Like, make something for yourself before you try and make something for everybody. Start module development as a passion project. Start module development as something like for your own games or for your own use of Foundry. Like, I wish that the software did this differently. I think you'll find that more fun and more enjoyable as part of the learning experience, to pick things that you personally care about. And other advice I would have is to, look at other modules that people have developed and engage your curiosity about, like, how did they do that? I think one of the best ways to learn is to look at what other people have done. Also, experiment with the core code base. I think our in-code documentation is quite good. And so, trying to delve into that and just be curious and learn. Last tip would be, don't be afraid to ask questions. Our Discord community is really lovely and helpful, and there's lots of really knowledgeable people, both our team and others, community developers who are super knowledgeable and willing and able to assist with working through challenges. There's also the League of Extraordinary Foundry VTT Developers, which is a sort of community organization of package module development enthusiasts, and they have a separate Discord server, which is really friendly and welcoming, and another really great place to ask for and receive support if you're looking for some help getting started. Let's see. Katie Land 89 asks, question, playing 5e, when players try to level up, it increases their current HP, not max HP. Long rests reset the current to match max. Any advice? This is a little bit of a system-specific question, but I can hopefully help, Katie. One of the things you need to be aware of is in a recent 5e update, there was a switch to using the advancement model for managing hit points. So when you have a character with a class, like level 1 cleric, a newly created, let me show what this looks like for a newly created actor, like new cleric. Adding the cleric class to this actor, it uses a new advancement system that like automates the computation of your hit points. It's sort of like a, walk through character creator type thing. So that like when you level up cleric to level 2, there's a prompt where you can choose, oh, am I taking the average HP? Am I rolling for it? I always roll for it. Oh, below average, that's usually what happens to me. But, roll my HP, get my new features. And then that is generally what handles computing, like automatic computation of your maximum HP. And when that automatic computation is on, things like increasing your constitution will automatically apply there. However, if on this HP thing, instead of using the automatic, if you have like an override in place, that maximum is always going to be capped at your override value. So it's possible that what's happening for you is that you have like an HP override in place instead of using like the default computed HP that would be a byproduct of your character advancement history. That's my best guess of what tip to give you there. Flowrat asks, is 2024 the year I finally get to GM a campaign again? I hope so, sir. That is, to a certain extent, up to you. Could be 2023. What's stopping you? You don't have to answer that question. I'm sure there's a lot that's stopping you. Let's see. I want to try and wrap up, but I want to get a couple more questions in. Spina's style question elaborating on my previous question. By detection automations, I mean usually you need to roll for your players to enter from exploration to encounter mode. You need to take into account lighting. You need to be ready to roll detection state, and you have to track this all the time. Yeah, so I'd say that the core Foundry software provides lots of frameworks for this. Like we know when the lighting level changes, we know when your token moves, we know when a token enters combat, we know when combat ends. All of like the data structures and event workflows to manage this sort of thing exist, but what checks are needed and when is ultimately up to the game system that you're playing to define. And some game systems favor more automation heavy, some game systems favor more automation light. Some game systems themselves maybe don't build automation for things like that, but modules do provide automation for things like that. I'm not sure, based on your question, what the core Foundry software could or should be doing a better job of here. It is something that is largely left up to game systems to implement and take advantage of. Question from Lektu: will it be possible someday to rename the usernames in the player list, decoupling the names from the actors? I don't want to rename John Smith to John_Smith. Yeah, I think that's a part of our software that is probably pretty old and pretty deserving of like some UI UX improvements. This user configuration app is almost like V1 of this application that has ever existed. It's one of the few places of the software that like hasn't really received improvements. I really think we should improve that. So I hope that someday, yes, Lektu, I hope it's possible to offer some better options there for people. Bushibotbo, Bushibo Tabo? I don't know, I'm guessing. Game board support still a thing. This is a tricky one. There is a very limited, and by very limited, I mean close to zero, things that we, as the developers of the Foundry VTT software, can do to better support Gameboard. There are some things, and we are looking into them. But I will say that a lot of the current state of that hardware user experience is a byproduct of the GPU that is in that device. And that's something that we have limited ability to overcome. Question from well, let me augment that by saying there's work being done there on the game board side to offer a GPU replacement. I don't know exactly what the status of that program is, or timelines, or what it might cost, or anything else, but I know that there is work ongoing to offer a board that has a different chip in it that would ostensibly, although I haven't gotten the chance to try it in person yet, but based on the specifications, it would be a major difference for usability. But I don't want to sell something that I haven't seen myself, and I don't want to make promises. But I know that that's something that's being worked on. Okay, let's see. Question from Florad. Any news on more configurable token bars? Stuff like reversing colors. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, Florian, you might be interested to look into like what the D&D system does here. I mean, other systems do other things, but you know, one of the things, for example, the D&D system does is it just extends the logic for drawing token bars. It does its own little extension to that, where, for example, like if you have like temp HP, it adds that temp HP as like a sort of like blue fill in the HP bar, or if you have like a penalty to your max HP from some like debuff, there's like a different logic here. Like this kind of thing sort of sounds like what you're getting at, and it's not hard, especially not at the system level, to like change the logic that's used to draw the token bar. And so I'd encourage you to maybe look at what 5e is doing there and see if that general approach could be, could be workable for you. Question, Spinastyle, do you believe a purely card fantasy game can be built in Foundry? Absolutely, yes. I confidently believe that a purely card fantasy game could be built in Foundry. Absolutely. The underlying data structures are all very strong for cards. It's just UI, UX that needs some implementation. But if you're implementing a card game, the needs of your UI, UX are going to be pretty specialized to the game that you're implementing. Definitely can be done. Question from Idle Times. A number of modules use drawings to outline areas in which a module has an effect. I know you dislike using drawings for that purpose since they're resource intensive. Any chance Core will provide lighter weight tools for defining areas that modules can use? Absolutely, yes. This is something I am pretty passionate about, Idle Times. I don't think it's something that will be done in V11 though, but I am pretty passionate about providing better tooling to define certain geometric areas of the scene. So rather than using a, say, polygon to say like, this is the area where if you step into this polygon, like a trap happens and a combat encounter springs. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of like event triggers. It could be for all kinds of things. But yes, providing a framework for defining geometries that don't require using a drawing document is something that I feel quite strongly about. So I'm confident that will be happening in the future. All right. I think this is about the end of the questions, and I'm feeling a little bit cooked at the moment. So I think this is probably a good time to wrap up for today. Any final questions for me? Thank you, Alexander. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you riding along with us and having curiosity in what our team has been up to. I hope you're excited by the new features. That goes for everybody. Thank you all for your interest and your support and your curiosity. And I hope that everyone's excited by what we're doing with V11. I'm really loving it as a user user of my own product, but also as a user, I'm loving it, and I'm pretty confident that you're all going to love it as well. So really excited to get that out to you all. We are now in the user testing phase. So if you do help us test, please back up your data, do it in a separate install location. Don't blow up your existing world because you were trying to test V11 on it. Exercise caution, but this is a great moment to start testing V11 and giving us your feedback about what is working for you, what's not working for you. This is the moment for that. So if you're inclined to spend a little time this weekend playing around with V11, this would be a great thing to do, and it would be very helpful for us to receive that feedback from you. So yeah, that's my guidance there. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. We will be having a lot of Foundry related programming coming up. One thing I'd like to pitch is that May is our anniversary celebration month. So we will have all kinds of Foundry related activities happening in May. We've got PaizoCon, we've got FoundryCon, we've got the anniversary celebration. We're going to have some content announcements. We're going to have some new content coming out. We'll have some videos coming out. We'll have some live streams, some giveaways. There's going to be lots of stuff happening in May, so please do stick around for that and pay attention to the announcements going out in Discord and on Twitter. And there's going to be lots of fun stuff happening coming up soon, so keep your eyes peeled for all of that. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will catch you next time. Farewell.